Hi everyone, welcome back to our test kitchen above Frontera Grill for a kitchen hangout. And since everybody in the chat app or the comments below seems to really love it when I do a lot of these sort of snacky Mexican foods, I decided to do my very favorite quesadillas fritas, the style of Mexico City. So I lived in Mexico City a long time ago, but sort of still live in Mexico City because I have an apartment there now. And when I go back, the street vendors are making these little quesadillas fritas that I like. I like to make them in our restaurant, and we have since day one. So for 33 years, these have been on the Frontera Grill menu. We make the little quesadillas fritas a little bit smaller than the street vendors do, but it's my favorite thing to go to those street vendors. And probably my favorite one is in the Lagunilla market on Sunday morning. There's a woman there that makes them out of blue corn masa, and she's got a whole array of fillings. Now, in my very first book, I sort of went around and I wrote down all the different fillings, learned how to make it from the street vendors. And you might think that quesadillas have to be filled with cheese, but they can be filled with all different kinds of things in Mexico City and in environments around there. But one of the very favorite things is squash blossoms that have been cooked with epazote. I'm going to show you one today that really is one of my very favorite of the quesadilla fillings, and that's the one with mushrooms. We're going to do cheese ones with epazote, and then we're going to do mushroom ones as well. So I've got a whole big pile of mushrooms here to work with. These are all shiitake mushrooms, and you could use whatever kind of mushroom suits your fancy, but just know all of them are going to have a different taste and a different texture to them. The first thing that I always do with shiitakes, you don't have to do this if you're doing button mushrooms or creminis. I wouldn't really recommend doing this particular preparation with portobellos, though I know a lot of you probably like portobellos. But they're going to be a little bit too large to cut up into small pieces. And if you don't take the gills out of those portobello mushrooms, the dark parts that are underneath, then you're going to end up with a very muddy flavor. So there's a lot, to me, there's a lot of waste on those portobellos because I like to get the gills off of them. With these shiitakes, which are pretty much my favorite of all of these mushrooms, because they have the strongest flavor, and they have, and you know I like strong flavors, but they also have the best texture, I think. Now I've got a pan that's hot here. I'm going to do this with a little fresh rendered pork lard that we get from Gunthorpe Farms, the people that do our pigs and chickens for our restaurant. And so I'm just going to shake that around in there with those I cut crosswise on the stems, always crosswise on the stems, never lengthwise, because you want to make them more tender. We'll throw these guys in here. I'm actually going to end up putting a little bit of water in there so that they can steam as well. But we'll get these guys all cut up. And you know, I'm cutting them at about 1/4 of an inch or so, crosswise. Let's talk about the other mushrooms you could choose from. We already talked about button mushrooms or creminis, which are related to one another. They're also related to portobellos, but I said no to portobellos. Oyster mushrooms will give you a really lovely texture, so you might want to use the oyster mushrooms in here or in combination with buttons, creminis, or shiitakes. Nice thing is, in some of the grocery stores these days, you can find a mixture of these kinds of. These are all cultivated mushrooms. They're not wild mushrooms. Right now is morel season where I live. So if you want to make luxurious quesadillas fritas, then your fried quesadillas are going to be fabulous made with those morel mushrooms, but you're probably going to be out foraging for them yourself. Okay, now a little onion is going to go into this mix too. Just a little bit of it I'm going to chop up to add to our pot here. And then I'm going to give it a little bit of garlic, just a clove of garlic, crushing it to get it out of its papery skin, and then chop that up fine, going crosswise first, and then doing the rock and chop back and forth. I don't want to get this as finely minced as I might for other dishes, but fairly finely chopped for this. And then I'm going to add a squeeze of lime to this mixture after I stir it all up, like that. And man, you can smell the shiitakes. They have one of the most wonderful aromas of any of the mushrooms. We'll put a little bit of water in here, and I'm going to give it a squeeze of lime because I like the way that it perks up the flavor. Now, in Mexico City, you'll find street vendors that do it just like this, or that do it with a little bit of tomato in it. I'm going to put the top on this and just let that simmer for a minute or two. While that's happening, let's talk about epazote, because especially in Mexico City, central Mexico, when you cook mushrooms, you always cook them with epazote. So here's the leaf of epazote. This is really big, beautiful epazote that we got into the restaurant just this morning. You can see it's got a jagged leaf like that, okay? And that, you can kind of recognize it very easily. This is really big epazote. The leaves are really big, so I'm going to take a few of those off of here. Probably that will be enough. I'll just leave the rest of them right there on the top of the cutting board. And then I'm going to roll them together, sort of like I would cilantro, and make it into a chiffonade, like that. And then we'll put that into our pot as well. Now, what we want to do, the reason I do this little steaming thing is to draw out as much flavor as I can from the mushrooms, and it just gets into everything. So I started it off, and a little bit of fat there, and then I put the liquid in there. I'm just using water. You could use any kind of stock or vegetable stock, chicken stock if you want to make it even richer. But when we hear all of the liquid has evaporated from it, they'll start to sound like they're frying again, just like they did at the very beginning there. But I'm going to throw a little bit of this epazote in here, and then we'll get on to, they look great. And wow, the smell of it is just beautiful. So all of that flavor of those very firmly textured shiitakes is coming out now. We'll infuse it with a little of this epazote flavor. Now, if you don't have epazote, first of all, I have to tell you, you can easily grow epazote. It grows just everywhere. I found it growing wild in all the parks in Chicago. It grows outside of our restaurant, at the base of the trees that are planted up and down Clark Street or Illinois Street here. So you can see it everywhere. I think probably we are responsible, our restaurant is responsible for why it grows around here, because when it starts to seed, then those seed heads are still on there, and the little seeds can just blow away. And so that's why I'm sure it's here, but I don't know why it's in the parks here in Chicago, but I find it everywhere. So it grows in this kind of climate. It grows all the way through the Southwest. I've seen it all over the United States. So you can grow it too. Just be aware that when it starts to go to seed, please cut it down, or cut the seed heads off of it, because it will just disperse its seeds everywhere, and you will have epazote coming up all over your yard. Your neighbors will have it in their yards. So just be careful about when it goes to seed. Okay, or you can buy it from a grocery store, from a Mexican grocery store. Rarely do you see it in the non-Mexican grocery stores. Okay, you also grow it in pots. It actually loves very, very weak soil, okay? So now we've got our masa. We have to talk about masa. Many of you will be using this product because it is widely available in the United States. This is Maseca. It's the largest producer of masa harina, or masa flour, in all of Mexico. It produces a very I don't know how to say this more politely, a very bland product. Okay, where you could perhaps find in some place in Mexico people working with heirloom corn that they've grown in that village for years and generations and maybe centuries. This doesn't taste like that. This is very neutral, so that anybody from one end of Mexico to the other can say, oh yeah, that's the flavor of masa. It doesn't taste like our masa, but it tastes like masa, okay? So this is available to you. It is pretty shelf stable. I would say don't try to keep it for more than a month or so on your shelf. If you have it, if you can't use it all up in a month or so, please put it in your freezer. Just put it in a bag and put it in your freezer, and it will stay for, I would say, 6 months or so. It's a pretty stable product. Okay, so that's maseca. You can reconstitute it according to the directions on the package. I say you use warm water, not room temperature tap water, but warm water, but it can just be warm tap water. And then you let it sit, I say, for about 20 to 30 minutes for the rehydration to be complete. Okay? And then you'll have something like this masa that's right here. But I would be remiss if I did not say that there is a product that you can buy mail order, which is actually made from heirloom corn. Most of this heirloom corn is grown in Oaxaca. The name of it is Macienda. You can go to macienda.com and you can buy this product. It's more expensive than the Maseca product, but it's really flavorful. And it's a masa harina product or a masa flour product as well. You just reconstitute it the same way, and it will give you more flavorful. Or you can go to a Mexican tortilleria, and it has to be one that boils and grinds corn kernels. Okay? In Mexico, they're harder and harder to find these days. You really have to look for them. So my suggestion is that if you have a tortilleria in your community that actually boils and grinds corn, buy fresh masa from them. Okay? That's what I have here, and this is made from heirloom corn, the same corn that is in this this Macienda product that's over here. Can you hear that now? That it's starting to sizzle nicely? That means that all of the moisture has evaporated. Oh, and it's starting to brown just a little bit, and that's all good. And I'm going to turn it off now and season it with a little bit of salt. It smells just incredibly good. You can tell this is one of my favorite of the fillings because I'm going on and on about how good it smells, but I love this kind of mushroom mixture. Okay, we want it to be pretty, I would normally just let this sit until it's completely cooled off before I make the little quesadillas for frying. And I've got this pan set up over here. You can do anywhere from a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of oil in it. I've got a really big pan because you know I love this pan, which takes more oil in it, but you don't have to fry it in a really big pan. It could be a smaller pan. 1/2 inch will be sort of shallow frying, which will give them a slightly different texture. If you go for a full inch, they will be deep fried. Now I've got this just warming on simmer, but now I'm going to want to get it up a little bit higher, so I'm going to turn up the fire under the oil so we can heat that up a little bit more. And let's go now to this masa. Okay, so look at the texture of this. This is super important. When you rehydrate your masa, you have to get enough liquid in it that it's sticky almost. So come in and look at this, because you have to look really closely at how it starts sticking on my fingers, okay? If your masa doesn't stick on your fingers like that, then it's not soft enough. That is the biggest problem most people have when they are working with masa. You see how wonderfully supple this is? It doesn't feel like a paste. It feels like a very soft paste. Okay, so that's masa. That's the consistency we want it. After you have rehydrated your masa, you need to add water a little bit at a time, no more than a tablespoon at a time, and get it to this consistency. When our masa comes in from our tortilleria that we work with, and here in Chicago, we work with El Popo, and have for 33 years. They grind it in the morning, they deliver it to us. It's pretty stiff, and then we put it into a big mixer. You can easily do this by hand, but we're doing like 50 pounds at a time. And we put it in one of those great big mixers and just slowly add water to it till we get it to this consistency. Okay, there are 4 quesadillas. They can be made with straight masa like this, but I actually prefer this one this version that's just a little bit richer. So I'm going to take, I used a little pork lard here. You could use olive oil if you wanted to. or any kind of oil. It will work fine. I just like the flavor of the fresh rendered pork lard with the epazote and the mushrooms. I'm going to use the same lard in here, about a tablespoon of that. You can use vegetable shortening for this if you would like to replace the lard with that. I'm going to put in 1/4 cup of flour, and I'm going to put a little bit of baking powder in here, and I'm also going to put a little bit of salt into this to season it. So this is the sort of enriched, we'll call this enriched masa, because it's going to be a little bit cakier than the masa if we were just to use straight masa. And lots of the street vendors use just straight masa. But I like this little enriched one because it gives that slightly richer and cakier casing for our little quesadillas fritas. Okay, so now I'm gonna just work it all in until I don't see much of that flour anymore. It's just a small amount of flour, but it takes a while to work it in. We also want to make sure you can't overwork this, I'll tell you. You can't overwork it because this kind of dough doesn't have any gluten in it. Well, we're introducing a little bit of gluten from the flour that we put in there, but it's not a gluten-based dough, it's corn dough. Okay, so we've got it finished now. I'm going to take a walnut-sized piece of it, and then in using the tortilla press. For this one, by the way, if you don't have a tortilla press, don't worry. Take two flat plates that are identical, and cut your pieces of plastic or vegetable bags from the grocery store, which is what these guys are here, and then just use the 2 plates to press. This one doesn't have to be pressed out as thin and as even as a tortilla, so you can easily use the 2 plate method. Put that down. I'm just pressing it gently. When I showed you the other day about gorditas, it was kind of the same thing, and I remember I said that this press is really uneven, so I had to flip it around a little bit just to flatten it out. Okay, so I went about a 4-inch one for this. These are little quesadillas, and everybody's going to certainly know cheese quesadillas, but you probably only know the quesadillas, the cheese quesadillas that are made with flour tortillas, sort of like the Mexican version of a toasted cheese sandwich. So I have some shredded cheese here, melting cheese, use what you like. Ours is a mixture of Colby and Jack that is made by a local Amish farmer that has his own herd of cows, and he makes us this gorgeous cheese. It's a simple cheese, but man, is it really delicious. And then, of course, the next step is to put the epazote in there. This is super common in Mexico City, to put your epazote flavor next to the cheese. If you don't have epazote, then you can make this with a little bit of cilantro in there. It's really good. So then you pick it up. So I pulled off the top piece of plastic. You pick up the thing, and you're just going to want to squeeze it together like this to make a little turnover. Now this one, I probably got a little bit too much cheese for the size of the tortilla, but we'll see what happens here. I'm going to flatten it just lightly so that it will fry here nicely, and then I'm going to take this, unmold it from that. It's going to unmold easily. Make sure that it's completely enclosed there, and then we'll go over here and we'll see. I can smell this oil is getting hot, but this is the way I would test it. Come in here and you can see that it vigorously is bubbling. So I'm just going to lay that down in the oil like that. Come back over here and take another little ball of the masa, and so I always say it's sort of like walnut size, small, something like that. You might say golf ball size, if that's of a better reference for you. Press this down gently. You don't want to press it out too far. I'm turning it around so that it'll press out evenly there. And then we'll take our little filling here of the mushrooms for this one. I'm going to go in here with a spoon and take a look at this stuff. So I said I would rather it be cold to do this, or warm at room temp, not warm at room temperature. But let's go and I'll show you how we'll do this. We'll pull up the two sides like that to completely encase that mushroom filling. It's sort of just wanting to stick out there, so I just put that down like that. And then this side, I'll flip it around so you can see it. We'll do the same thing with this one, and just make sure that it's completely well sealed. Now, when I peel this off of it, like this, I am going to lay this. I pinched it to make sure that they're completely sealed like that. I'll lay this guy into the oil here. We will take our, this is dangerous by the way, you know, I keep all of my utensils in the sanitizing water there, but I can't go into oil with wet tongs because it would splatter everywhere. So I'm going to dry those off and then flip this guy over. See how pretty that is? Okay, now while those are finishing up over there, I am going to make a quick salsa. This is my favorite salsa to go with these kinds of things. I may have to stop halfway through in order to, I'm going to move this guy over here, in order to take that cheese one out. You have to watch these guys because remember it has cheese in it, and the cheese can kind of expand, and when the cheese expands it may start leaking out, so we want to be careful about that. But this is a tomatillo and avocado sauce here, so I'm gonna cut up some tomatillo and put it into the blender and put that with a little bit of chili and a clove of garlic. It's just going to go in here raw. So this is not the roasted tomatillo stuff here. So we've got chili just roughly chopped like that, a clove of garlic which I will mash and take out of the skin, and then it's already broken in half here, so I will be able to just throw it in there like that. Now I'm going to need a little bit of water, so I'm going to grab some water from the tap here, about a half a cup, oops, sorry, to get this thing started here, and then put some salt in here, and we're going to make a slushy puree out of this. This is one of my favorite salsas to work with because it goes together so incredibly fast. So we'll start getting that puree. Okay. There we go with that. And then we will open up an avocado, take the little button end out, cut around the pit, and then I'm going to get the pit out this way, the prep cook way, and then use a spoon here. I think this one's probably a better one to grab. And then put the avocado into the blender jar with our tomatillo and chili puree. At the same time, I'm going to take a little bit of cilantro and add that to the mix. And that's all there is to that one. I've got a little cilantro here. I'll tear it up like that, drop it in, and then we'll have our creamy tomatillo. That's all there is to that. Creamy tomatillo back over here. Look at these guys. That's pretty. I'm going to take these out over here. And at this moment, I'm going to invite Lainey Bayless to come and talk you through a really delicious cocktail. I only know that because she already made one here, and we had the opportunity to taste it before we even started this Facebook Live. So, Lainey, why don't you take it away?
Hi, guys. So I wanted to teach a very fun, simple, refreshing cocktail Could be great for Memorial Day weekend in Chicago. We are hoping for some nice weather, so hopefully you get to be outside and hanging out with your family. So I just wanted to do something really refreshing, easy, and fun for you guys. So I'm calling this sort of like a cilantro tequila tonic, though it's a little bit, it's got a little bit more going on than that. Obviously, I think people are very familiar with a gin and tonic, a very classic cocktail that people drink all over. But lots of things taste delicious with tonic, and personally, I love tequila with tonic. Tequila's got a little bit sweeter of a flavor, so it sort of helps balance that bitterness of the tonic out really nicely. So for this one, I wanted to add a couple more ingredients to make it a little more fun. So I'm going to start with some cilantro leaves. I've just got a nice big bunch of cilantro here. I'm going to take maybe about 8 to 10 leaves out. Just enough to coat the bottom of your shaker. Yeah, that looks probably about good there. Then, just for fun, I thought it'd be nice to add a little piece of jalapeno into that too. Now, as my dad said, we were sort of testing this beforehand, and I did notice that these particular jalapenos are very spicy. So I am going to take out the center part, the ribs and the seeds. Just gonna pop it out here, and just use the outside flesh. What that does is really help amplify that green flavor that the cilantro is gonna give without adding too much spice. Now, of course, if you don't want any chili at all, feel free to leave that out, or if you do want something more of a spicy cocktail, put all the seeds and veins and everything in there, and you'll get a nice spicy guy there. So, I've got those things in there, and then I'm going to start off with a pretty basic proportion of a ½ ounce of lime juice and a ½ ounce of simple syrup. Now, you are welcome to use agave in this. That's actually what I had done with the first one that we tasted earlier today. But it did make it pretty sweet. So if you are going to use agave, I would say go a little light on your ½ ounce or 1 tablespoon of that sweetener. But if you are going to use a homemade simple syrup, which I hope by now you have made and popped in your fridge, feel free to use that ½ ounce measurement. So I'm going to take these ingredients now with a muddler. This is a bar muddler. Or if you don't have one of these, you can use the back of a wooden spoon. That works too. And I'm going to break up everything that's in the bottom of this shaker. So there you go. It is helpful to do this when there's a little bit of liquid in there, just so you're not just banging against dry stuff. So that's why I sort of do just an ingredient or two and then muddle it in there. Now, in order to help sort of amplify that refreshing nature of this cocktail, really go with the little slight bitterness in that tonic water, I'm going to use 1 ounce of grapefruit juice. Ooh, a little spill there. So this, again, sort of something that you can omit if you don't have it, but I think it really helps make the cocktail a little more complex, not just sort of a basic tonic, something in tonic, but it gives it a really nice, fun flavor to it. So I have got all that. That's sort of my base there, and then on top of it, I'm going to add 2 ounces of El Tesoro Blanco tequila. Now, this is definitely one of those cocktails that you want to use a Blanco tequila for, not anything aged, just because you're going for that refreshing nature of the drink. So if you had something with age, it would give it a little more sweetness. That's not really what we're going for in this today. Okay. So 2 ounces of that goes in there. Now, I did choose El Tesoro, same as last week actually, because I really like the fact that it's got a really nice, strong agave flavor to it. So because this drink is a little bit basic, there's not a ton of ingredients or liqueurs or anything that we're mixing into it, then I think it's really nice to use a little bit nicer of a tequila, one you're really going to taste the flavor of in the final product. So I'm going to shake this all together. I promise I washed my hands right before this. pop this lid off. Now, in order, when I was sort of thinking of this drink, I sort of was thinking of it like a cross between a mojito with that cilantro muddled in there and that tequila tonic thing. So, because of that, I'm actually going to take a couple more cilantro leaves and muddle them, just give them a quick muddle in the bottom of this glass so that you get the effect of having all of the, having some real leaves in there without all the ones I've sort of crushed up and bruised in the bottom of my shaker already. So just give this a little pop there. Oh, got some of it got on that. And I'm going to strain this mixture into my glass there. Now I'm going to top with some ice cubes. When I'm making drinks, I always like to strain everything off and put the ice in last. That way you know that you know the right proportion of ice to drink. You're not wasting some of the cocktail, if the case may be. So that's why I always put the ice in afterward. So did that. Now I'm going to top it. This is a delicious top note tonic. If you're in the Midwest, this is a great one to buy. It comes out of Milwaukee. And you can find it at your local Binny's or grocery stores. Whole Foods carries it as well. If not, obviously you can use any sort of tonic water that you have at home. I am going to do that. May I borrow one of those little spoons over there just to give it a little stir? Now, anytime you do top something like this, I always suggest giving it a stir. That way you've incorporated everything together, and you're not just leaving sort of the tonic on top and the drink on the bottom. So giving it just a little bit of a stir. And there we have our cilantro tequila tonic.
Nice. And I think it will go beautiful because it's so refreshing. Any kind of gin and tonic like thing I find very refreshing with these quesadillas fritas because they are fried. So it's one of those delicious things that just makes your mouth water. While Lainey was making the cocktail, I fried up a couple more of the quesadillas fritas there so that we have 2 of the mushroom ones and 2 of the cheese ones, and then of course the avocado tomatillo salsa. This stuff is really, really good and easy to make, but it doesn't last. So always make it right before you eat it. In another couple of hours, it won't be as beautiful and fresh. Serve it with the cilantro tequila tonic, and you will have a memorable Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Well, thank you so much for being with us, hanging out in the kitchen. I'll be back again next Friday, and if I can get her to come, she'll be back too.
Bye.